Pär is joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Hi, Pär. How are you?
I'm fine today. Good to see you.
Great to see you as well. Although your name requires no introduction, you are very well known in the entire Stockholm, Nordic, and the global ecosystem. But we'll still start with kind of a human moment. If you could tell us a bit about yourself so that the audience who have not met you before or not connected with you before can see and hear about you.
Thank you. Well, born in the middle of Sweden, moved to Stockholm 1975. I'm sort of a half engineer and went to Stockholm School of Economics and thought I'm going to be a researcher. So I continued my PhD study at UCLA. So I lived in Los Angeles for some time. And then I have had a journey in the industry, built a couple of companies, also actually built production companies in Russia and a couple of other countries, and most lived in Sweden. 2 kids, do run a lot, like opera and making food and be with my family.
Thank you. So
now I lost you.
I'm just picking that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Sting's.
I hear you not really.
We had a technical glitch, but we're back. But Pär, we would like to know a little bit about the Sting journey. Where and how did it start, and how did it bloom into several ecosystem components? If we can start at the very beginning somewhere.
Yep. So I started after being in industry as CEO and building companies for 19 years in electronics, laser technology. That was up to 1999. Then I started with my colleague to work with startups. Well, the name startup was not invented at that time, 1999. So I worked with new startup tech companies outside Stockholm in a place called Kista. It was me and a friend of mine. And then there was very few so-called startups in Stockholm at that time, very, very few. So 2001, I was asked by a foundation called Electrum Foundation. And that's a foundation that is backed by the City of Stockholm, Ericsson, ABB, Royal Institute of Technology, and a couple of others. I was asked by them if I could help them come up with an idea of how to foster and generate a new generation of growth companies in Kista, but because at that time, 2001, it was only Ericsson, and then it was Ericsson, and then it was Ericsson, and then it was IBM, and almost no under vegetation. So I got actually an assignment from this foundation, and I said, okay, let me think about that. And then I had worked with startups for a couple of years already. So I went to Israel in 2001 and studied what they have done in Israel. They built a really interesting incubator system starting in 1992, and then they kickstarted a venture capital community in 1992, also with a Yoshma program. And what made me sort of kick there was that they had taken a system approach of how to build an ecosystem in reality, not just a fuzzy word. So the idea of sort of a system I took with me from Israel in 2001. And then I also spent some time in UK, around Cambridge, and also actually in a couple of cities in Sweden. And after that, after half a year, I had an idea of an ecosystem to grow new startups in Kista, which is just a small part of Stockholm. So this foundation, I presented this idea to them 19th of December 2001, and they said, okay, this is interesting. Can you do this? So in January 2002, I started build what today is Sting, but it was, the first name was Kista Innovation and Growth. And I was on my own the first year, and today we are 20 persons, and we have sort of grown slowly over the years. So Naimul, that was sort of the essence of the start.
Okay, great to know. Was just because Shista right now is quite a big technical hub. Was it like that at that time as well, or was it just building up at that point in time?
It was very technical, and the few startups that came out of Kista 2001 was really deep tech things coming out on the Electrum laboratory. It was thin film technology and it's a really deep technology, but very, very few. So it was really deep tech, and that was how we started. Our DNA instinct was in deep tech, and after over the years we have shifted over. So we do lots of things in the digital space, of course, but we started as sort of a deep tech focused actor.
Okay, that's great to know the deep tech roots and now going into broader digital domain. So let's talk a little bit about the post 2002 period, how the accelerator itself grew and what other ecosystem initiatives got around and
Yeah.
how this spread out in Stockholm.
As I said, the initial idea was to take a what I call a system approach on the whole thing, and you know, a system is something that is based on components that go. So when we started, we said, okay, here are the components that are probably needed for a system. Some of the components we think we are going to operate and manage on our own. For instance, the incubator and a couple of other things. There are other components that is probably needed in the system, but that doesn't need to be our core business. So besides our incubator and accelerator, we have then over the years launched a number of initiatives that have created components in the Stockholm ecosystem that we are co-owners of, or we have just initiated it. And some of these we have initiated a couple of co-working spaces. The first one was Sub 46, and then also another one called Things. And we've been co-owners of them and sitting in the boards, but it was not us managing them. We are also have also inspired to build something called Ignite Sweden, which is Sweden's or Europe's largest matchmaking platform for corporates and startups. That started as a project within Sting first, and became later on Ignite Sweden together with many other actors. And we use that, but we don't operate it. Then during 2014, we started the first angel matchmaking platform called Propel Capital, which is mainly inspired by the original Y Combinator concept, where you pool angel resources into one platform, and then you invest from that platform in many companies, and then angel do the follow-ons. So it's like a dating company. And we started that 2014, and now we are just started Propel Capital number 6. This is Sweden's largest pre-seed investor. We have done 175 investments, and we have helped other actors in Sweden build similar platforms like Fast Track Capital in Malmö, like Arctic Ventures in Luleå, etc. We're also the initiator of a venture capital company called Luminar Ventures. 2015, there were very few left early stage VCs in Sweden, very few. It was only a few big shots left. So we took the initiative to start what is today Luminar Ventures. And they invest all over Sweden and now running successfully also their second fund. But we were sort of the initiator of that way back. So yeah, we sort of try to identify components that are, we think, needed to help startups succeed and make the journey quicker. And some of these things we operate on our own, and some we let others do. For instance, the incubator accelerator is the core of what we do, and the accelerator we started 2013. we started as an incubator, and then it took 10 years before we started our accelerator program. Now we run both an incubator and accelerator program.
Great. What a journey, and what an amazing and complex development in several aspects. I have two questions. One is, I'm very curious about knowing, because you at the very early stage when you started answering this question, you talked about that we made a choice what we are going to be doing on our own, and what is something that we don't need to be involved on our own, but we can help build. Now that's a hard choice. Uh, how was that done, or was it easy or difficult to let go of things? Yeah, because choice is a major aspect of even when you are building startups as an entrepreneur. What decision? So it was a decision.
Yeah, that's a good question. When we started, we decided that let's focus on qualified, massive business development support from extremely experienced persons. That was the basic idea. The core of us is that we have very experienced business coaches, today 12, 13 persons, and they are all serial or ex-entrepreneurs. So we decided, let's concentrate on qualified, high volume, many hours per company, business development support from 12, 13 business coaches. And with that said, we realized pretty quick that, okay, operating an office hotel where the business model is renting space and sending invoices for renting the space, that is not necessarily our core. So that was ruled out sort of pretty quick. We really wanted to concentrate on the core, which is coaching hands-on companies to increase their likelihood of success. But we need physical spaces, so we wanted to create this environment. And for instance, then with Ignite, or the matchmaking platform, we realized we thought first that we was going to run it in-house. It started as something called Team Up with Swedish or the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. But then we very quickly realized this needs to be scaled on a national level, because to have a volume with corporates and startups that produces enough matches, you need volume of both sides. So we teamed up with Things and a couple of other incubators in Sweden, and Ignite was formed as a national initiative. Okay. Yeah, so that was it's different stories for different components.
No, that's great to know. And you earlier talked about your journey to Israel, and then the systems approach and setting different components together. What do you think has been the red thread, or kind of the glue that has held all this together, or help this become a cohesive and collaborative ecosystem? What?
Yeah. Well, one is, as we said, so the system approach. That is, I think, has been extremely important. That we have this holistic idea of what is actually needed in the Stockholm Greater Area. Another very important thing is that Sting, we're a non-profit company. We're an evergreen non-profit company, so nobody is actually making money on Sting. In this way, we can act extremely long term. We can have a long-term approach, and we can be trusted, since we don't have an own private economic agenda, like a venture capital company or an accelerator that are sort of tech startups or something like that. Nothing problem with that, but they are all great. But we're a non-profit evergreen company. I think that has been extremely important also. Another very important thing is that we have had and have really strong backers over 20 years that have believed in us and think that we can provide growth to the Stockholm Greater Area that produces tax income for the city and the state that produce wealth. So over these years always had strong backers like Royal Institute of Technology, the City of Stockholm, the region, and private investors that also donate money to us because they think we are doing a real important work in a society. Then we have delivered results. I think that's pretty important. The backers had not continued to back us if we hadn't sort of been able to show that this is showing results. I mean, we have backed 375 companies now, and they have what is it? They have 3,500 employees today. They have raised 900 million euro and have a market cap of 2 billion euro. So there come out quite a number of big companies from us, which creates value in society. And if we hadn't these results, our backers had probably not continued to back. The last one I would say is, of course, I mean, everybody knows that if you don't have a very qualified and engaged team, nothing would happen. and we've had the fortune to have so many good persons working in STIM that are extremely engaged, helping others to succeed without a private own economic agenda. So that's a couple of.
But that's amazing, Pär. I'm just trying to create an ecosystem model for anyone out here listening about how to create ecosystems. So I was trying to put all this discussion together, that you start with a systems approach. There have to be backers around you. And then you have, in your case, the nonprofit model works very well, and it all gets supported through team. And in the middle is hard choices which you are making, like what to let go and what to develop as your core competence, and that delivers the results. So I think I'll just draw it up and send it off to the chat.
That's great. Thanks a lot for that.
But really interesting discussion so far, Pär. I want to move to another topic. Like you've been in Stockholm and you have helped develop this ecosystem. What do you think is something which makes Stockholm a great place for building unicorns, startups, or that entrepreneurship momentum that we see here? Why is Stockholm a place to build things?
There's so many factors behind that. And one is really historic. Sweden have been very open to international influences the last 400 years. We've always sort of imported know-how from starting the steel industry with people from the Dutch region. So we sort of the openness to influence from outside. And from that, Sweden have created a number, I would say an amazing number of Swedish corporates that are world leading in their field. I don't think you find any other country having so many leading international company per capita. I mean, we have Ericsson, we have ABB, IKEA, H&M, Atlas Copco. I mean, there is 20, 30 really big. And what's about this? Well, many young people have a father or a mother or a cousin working in these companies. So by childhood, you get to know that, well, yeah, it's international companies you work with. So I think the society is sort of impregnated by, well, it's large international companies. If you're going to build something, you better do that. And of course, the size of the country helps a lot because we're such a small country. So if you're going to build a big company, you need to go outside, which I think the venture capital company loves with Sweden, since we are thinking international day one. If you're in Germany, you can think, well, I'll build a big company in Germany, but a VC want not only Germany, they want the whole world. So that's another factor. Then I think the societies, the values in the society has been instrumental here. And I'm thinking specifically about from kindergarten, kids here are sort of schooled to think on their own. and to question things. It's a flat, here not hierarchical system, and you're taught to think on your own and don't think that your boss is often right, which he usually is not. So, but in some other countries where more hierarchies and more sort of a other type of education system, you are taught perhaps that you need to listen to your boss, and if you don't have a specific written down description what you should do, you don't do it. So here it's sort of, we are taught to take, I would say, initiatives and think on our own. I think that's then this is a work balance thing. Of course, in Sweden you can become a successful company and have some sort of work balance, and even female. It's a fantastic environment for female founders. And we have the last batch, Naimul, this is interesting. The last batch this year of companies, 38 companies, interesting. More than 60% of them have a female founder, and 47 of the companies this year have a female CEO. That's sort of things that doesn't happen in other countries. So if you're interested in becoming a female founder, well, Stockholm and Sweden is a great place to work.
No, that's an amazing how would you say, statistic. And I know there was a very deep discussion which Mekar was leading at the lunchtime with ecosystem on the female founders situation, but this statistics should pop up there. So I think that's great work that Sting is doing, and which is happening in Stockholm. If we take one last point before we disconnect, there's a lot of I would not say pessimism, or maybe this is realism. So the venture capital industry, how it is shifting in the last 3-4 months since the time that YC letter came out, and there's been a lot of debate going on. How do you see because you work a lot at an early stage as an incubator, accelerator, and then things and other places where co-founders are sitting. How does the outlook look for founders out here in the medium term, short and medium term?
Yeah, I would say pretty good. In this really early stage sector, we're not as influenced as in later stage. Of course, we're influenced, but the investors, for instance, if you talk about them here, is mostly the first investors are angels. And of course, the angels who are not experienced, new angels, rookies, and have most of the money connected to the stock exchange, they have pulled back right now. But the experienced business angels who have been there for 10 years, they know that this is a great time. So I wouldn't say that the investors right after us, that there's such a big problem there. It's probably a little bit later. So we haven't seen a massive crisis for that. Not really. But a little bit later, I think it's more problematic. The values have gone down and things like that. But that's part of the sort of market correction. It's not sort of big problem. So I don't see big problem there. We see more problems, I would say, to get your customers, because the pandemic have made many of the corporates very slimmed, and they have so many problems with supply and logistics and supply chains, because they have big orders. So it's more difficult today than 3 years ago to get a meeting with a corporate to sell something to them. That's more problematic, and that's most important you do as a startup, is find the first customer. So more problems finding customers, I would say, than finding investors.
Okay, great. I think that resonates with Magnus said when he came in the morning from Antler, because he was very positive. And then Marvin also talked about a lot of dry powder in the US market itself. And then we had Catapult as well. So I think that's the consistent theme. If you are building something which is great, you will get funded. That's one thing. But your point is very interesting, that founders I think one of the main challenge that has been happening even at the late stage is like lack of discipline and kind of forgetting the business dynamics of a business building process and relying on funding to just create an engine of unlimited growth without care for bottom line or other impact indicators. But great, Pär, this was awesome discussion. We really enjoyed the entire journey of your building the startup ecosystem and the entire model. So I'll email this to you later in the night. It's quite interesting. But thank you so much for joining, and really appreciate that staying and you could take out time for being with us at Nordic.
Thank you for having me, Naimul.
Thank you. Thank you.